Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to a very special author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Maybe you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is a Wandering Scribe alumni. Now, many of you may remember this incredible guest. I want to say possibly, maybe earlier this year or possibly even last year, as she was part of an amazing lineup of editors for my series, The Writers Hub. And beyond being an editor, she is also the incredible author of an amazing book series. Sister Samurai is arguably probably one of her most popular series, but she is more than just an author and an editor. She is an incredible person and a very dear friend of mine. And in this very special author interview, I have with me a list of fan questions that a lot of viewers have sent to me through my website to ask this incredible person. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to a returning guest back here on the show, Tatiana Obey. Tatiana, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to be back. Um, I've been back several times for the editors panel and then the Sister Samurai panel. So this is actually, I was telling Gabriel, my first fan interview question, question interview. So I'm interested to see what questions you guys have for me.
Awesome, awesome. Now, Tatiana, before we dive into these list of fan questions, as a little refresher for the new viewers who are now just meeting you for the very first time, can you share with us your journey of being an author and then recently getting into the world of editing?
Yes. So my name is Tatiana Obey, and I kind of have been writing ever since I was little, but it wasn't until the pandemic that I decided, okay, I wanted to take the plunge and I wanted to publish books. And I did my research. I decided that indie publishing was the route that I wanted to go. And in 2022, I published my debut, which was Bones to the Wind, and then the follow up, Dragging Your Bones, in the same year. So it was a duology, and these two are complete. But once I finished these very big, hefty books, I wanted to do something a little bit smaller, a little bit more fun, a little bit more experimental, and that's when I published Sister Samurai. It was, I believe, December of 2023 or November, December 2023 when I published this, and then 2020, and then the next year, 2025, I published its sequel. I'm currently working on the third book in the series. Hopefully, I can get that out by the fall. And then I also started editing 2 years ago. I did work for a small press, kind of freelance editing, and then kind of stopped and paused to focus on my own work. And now I'm kind of brought that back to jointly do both editing and writing. Um, so that's my journey so far.
Awesome. Awesome, Tatiana. So now let's dive into the first set of questions of fans. So, one fan would like to know, and I think you may have mentioned this earlier in your previous interview, but they would like to know, how did you develop your ideas for both Sister Samurai and the Bones to the Wind duology?
Um, I'm a big fantasy reader. Like I enjoy this genre. It's my home genre, what I love to read. And so I've read a lot in the genre. And I think having read a lot in the genre, you begin to see I don't know, kind of the spaces or the holes, oh, like this story hasn't been told yet. And that kind of really inspired me to write a lot of the stories that I write. So for example, Bones to the Wind, I wanted to write a coming of age journey, but from the point of view of like a young Black female MC. I felt like we do have a lot of coming of age in the fantasy genre, but I didn't feel like a lot of those experiences reflected the experiences I had growing up.
Mm.
Um, so I wanted to kind of like capture that in a way that I thought the fantasy genre hadn't done so before. And in a very similar vein, going back to Sister Samurai, again, love the fantasy genre, but you didn't see a lot of like older Black female main characters, Black action heroines, and it's just like I didn't see it. So, I wanted to write it. I wanted to show like how badass our ladies are, and have narratives and stories that really centers around them, their goals, their motivations, that gets into the heart of their stories, which I thought felt was a little lacking in the fantasy genre.
Absolutely. And I just have to say, viewers and listeners, I had a chance to read the first in the Sister Samurai series, and honestly, it felt like I was reading an anime come to life. I also love the fact, and this isn't a spoiler about the book, so no worries, viewers and listeners, but there are specific things in the book that I really appreciate. How there's almost like a music track for, the inspiration for Sister Samurai. There's also some commercials in the book, which really pay homage to anime and Saturday morning
Yeah.
cartoons, which I absolutely loved and appreciate. And it really showcased the uniqueness of Sister Samurai because I don't think any other book has ever done that.
Well, when I thought about it, I was like, this is probably one of the only books that can pull it off. Like,
Yeah, that is true. That is true, Tatiana. Now, another fan would like to know between the Bones duology and the Sister Samurai series, which one was the most challenging to write?
I would have to say definitely the duology, the Bones duology was harder to write, the A Forging Wage duology. Um, and one because of, its length. So it took me much, much longer to write. And I always tell people that when they're kind of getting into my stuff, since the Samurai is a little bit more accessible to where Bones to the Wind, I feel like you do need to have like some intermediate knowledge of fantasy, right? You go in and it's a secondary world fantasy. These terms are made up. It's a lot of world building, it's a lot of characters. So like all the world building, all the characters, like all keeping all the plot straight, that's a lot more harder, a lot more challenging when you get into like these really big epic fantasy series. So I would argue that because of its length, Samurai was easier for me to write. So for example, the Forging Age duology took me 4 years. This took me 3 months to write.
Oh yes, I remember. I remember you mentioned that.
Yeah, but plus another month with to do beta reader revision, so 4 months in all. Um, but it so definitely a Forging of Age was the hardest for me to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now this one is a two-parter, and one viewer would like to know when you're writing both series, which did you want to highlight more, themes or tropes in your stories? And going back to what you mentioned before, Tatiana, what inspired the themes or tropes in both books?
Ooh, all right. I'm writing it down so I don't forget. It's a long question.
No problem.
Okay, so for both series, themes or tropes. So as a writer, um, I do use thematic content a lot just to keep me, especially as an epic fantasy writer, just to keep me kind of on track. Because when you finish writing the first draft and you're looking at what the things I need to add and what things I need to cut, I use theme to tell me like, okay, this does not serve my theme. This does not serve my story. I need to cut it. This doesn't serve the theme. This doesn't serve the story. So keep it. So for example, um, you have in A Forging of Age, it's a coming of age story there, but the premise is once you reach a certain age, you have to go into the desert and you're competing to slay a dragon to come of age. And so the whole idea of this coming of age competition lends to the themes,
Mm,
lends to the themes of becoming an adult and what that looks like. So a lot of it helps me, the characters, the world building, it helps me tying it together by theme helps me stay track. So theme is very important when I'm writing. Um, you see that a little bit also you also see that reflected in Sister Samurai too. Like a lot of the choices made is regards to the theme in regards to celebration, giving grace, understanding, forgiveness, all of the choices that are made lends itself to this theme. In regards to trope, no, I am a terrible trope subverter. Like I love tropes, but I cannot write a trope straight
Same.
to save my life. So I think like that's why a lot of people like get surprised by a lot of the plot twists that happen in my books because it's like, oh yeah, we're on track with the trope. We're on the trope. Like, oh no, we're going you turn, go in the opposite direction. Um, so I think because I read a lot of fantasy, and I'm familiar with a lot of fantasy, I think I get bored with some of the tropes, the constant tropes, the common tropes in the genre. And for me, I'm like, okay, let's do something different. Let's see if we do this and do that. Um, so I do tend to like subvert a lot of tropes in my different books and in my writing. And I think the second part of that question is what inspired the themes and what inspired the tropes. And it goes back to that question that you asked earlier in regards to those missing holes in the genre. Again, I
Mhm.
wanted to tell a coming of age story. And so all the tropes and themes feed into how can I tell this coming of age story? How can we ask the question what it means to be an adult, what it means to be an adult in this fantasy setting, especially in a world that um, doesn't care about you. You know, what is it like? What is it like coming of age in a world that does not care about you? Um, and then same for this one, right? Like the themes of the book is kind of celebrating um, female narratives, just in celebration of blackness, celebration of joy, celebration of the things that we love. So just those holes that I want to see in the genre. Like I didn't see a lot of those type of stories, and I was like, okay, that is what I want to tell. That's the story that I want to say.
Absolutely, Tatiana. And that kind of follows up with another fan question who would like to know for the main characters in both books and their respective series, and you can even go forward, even talking about the side characters as well. How did you make them feel authentic in the sense that it makes sense for these characters to exist in the world that they are a part of?
hmm Well, Bones to the Wind has kind of a longer story. So this is a story that I initially wrote in high school. And by the time I finished writing that story, I found that I myself had become a better writer, and I no longer really liked what I had written. So I set the story down for a while, and it wasn't until years later where I decided, hey, I want to indie publish. I want to come back to this character because this character, Raja, she's a character that's been in my head since high school. She hasn't left me. Sometimes you have those characters that haunt you until you tell their story. And so I'm like, okay, I want to tell her story. So I completely rewrote it to give her a better story and to share that story with all of you. But sometimes the characters, they come to you first like a wrecking ball. It's like, okay, all right. So when I get characters first, and I primarily do get characters first, um it has happened, but most and sometimes I do get plots first, but I mostly get characters first. So when I get
Right.
characters first, I'm thinking of, okay, what's the best story to showcase this character? What's the best plot to showcase this character? What's the best way on how I can show you this character? So a lot of the times the world builds around the character. Um, and I'm also a discovery writer. So most of the time, like I have an idea of where the plot's going, but the character's driving the story. So if the character doesn't want to do that, then I'm just like, okay, all right, I guess we're doing this. So I'm just kind of going with it. And I think that helps some of my stories feel a little bit more authentic because the characters are driving it. For example, with Sister Samurai, again, this character is one that kind of came to my head first as a character. And she definitely has like some traits of my mom in there. But like like with Sister Samurai, there's definitely something she's like, no, I'm not doing that. No.
Nice. That's
um
amazing.
Yeah. So I think the characters definitely live in my head first and foremost, sometimes even before the story comes.
All right,
Mhm.
Tatiana. And it's interesting you brought up characters because this next question, oh, it's going to be a difficult one. And you actually may struggle with this question. So I apologize.
Okay.
So, between the Bones duology and the Sister Samurai series, do you have a favorite character between both? And bonus question, do you have a character that was so
Okay. So my favorite character to write, again, is I would say Raja. And I say that because she's been in my head for so long. I kind of know her actions and her decisions fairly easily. But sometimes when I am writing a new book and there's side characters, and I don't know who they are yet, I feel like those side characters who I don't know who they are the more difficult to write. Usually it takes me to get to like a first or second draft until I understand, okay, this is who this character is, this is who that character is. So, for example, I currently have a book out with beta readers. There is a side character that I struggled with because she wasn't in the previous versions of the story, and I didn't know who she was. So as a discovery writer, it takes for me to write them and to figure out who this character is for me to understand like, okay, this is who they are. Those are the difficult characters, at least for me, are the ones that takes me a while to figure out who they are or tells me and shows me who they are a little bit later. Um, but yeah, I would say Raj is my favorite, and you haven't seen the last of her.
all right, all right, nice, nice, Tatiana. And one second, just gotta close my thing real quick. There's some outside noise. Be right back.
Okay, no problem.
All right, all back, all
Yeah.
fixed.
But I also want to add though, like having now written 5 books, going on 6 books, I've written a lot of characters, and there's a lot of good characters.
I told you this was going to be a
There's a
difficult
lot of
one
good
to
characters.
answer.
Like even like Kayla in the sequel. I don't know if you guys have read Kayla in the sequel, but like Sister Samurai has such a strong voice in the first book, but shockingly, Kayla's voice is so strong in this one. It's just like tone it down, girl. I mean, she is a great character that just pops off the page as well. Um, and it's like, okay, I guess this is the journey we're going on.
All right, all right. And oh, and this question I did have to ask because one of my reviewers who remember that I was writing my own samurai story and I added this historical character, they would like to know in because you're currently writing the third book in
Yes.
the Sister Samurai series. Okay, that's perfect because it actually goes perfectly with this next fan question. They would like to know, and I don't know if this may throw your story in a loop, but is it possible that we may get a character homage to Yasuke, the famous African samurai who existed in feudal Japan?
Um, Probably not. Um, and I say that because, the I already clearly have what's plotted. But, like one of the reasons why I kind of shy away from it is I started Sister Samurai and I started the series particularly to celebrate women's stories. Um, in fantasy, but also in the anime genre. There is a
All
lot
right.
of gatekeeping in anime, especially in regards to Black
Mm.
women, especially in regards to bullying
Ah,
Black women
okay.
in Black women spaces. And you don't see as much as that bullying with Black men because you already have these media properties like Afro Samurai. You have a historical instance like Yasuke, where
Ah,
you have
okay.
a Black samurai in Japan. So So a lot of people can't argue against that, right? We have a historical evidence of it. And this series particularly is to create space for Black women in fandom culture and anime culture. So because of the purpose of the reason why I wrote this is the reason why there probably isn't going to be an homage to Yasuke. But he is a great historical figure.
Absolutely. And you
Yeah.
do bring up a very good point, Tatiana. And there's actually going to be some fan questions that are going to tackle this discussion even further. Now, kind of the same style of question, but now focusing away from characters, but now on moment and scenes. Do you have a favorite scene or moment from the books? And bonus question, was that favorite scene originally difficult to bring to life?
See, this question's very hard. One of the reasons why this question is very hard is because a lot of these books I've written years ago, right?
Mm,
Like I published the duology in 2022, but that means I was writing it before then. I published Sister Samurai in 2023, but I was writing it in 2022, and at that point, that's 4 years ago. Um, so it is honestly hard to remember the emotions regarding the
right.
scenes. All that being said, I have books that I'm writing now that I have favorite scenes too,
Ooh,
um,
okay.
that aren't released yet. There's definitely in the book that is with beta readers right now, and this one is my next epic fantasy is set in the same world as the duology, but it's a standalone, and you can kind of pick it up without reading it, without reading the previous books. Um, there are some fight scenes that I'm just like, oh, this is so good and so fun.
Nice.
So it's hard to like kind of go back. I definitely better remember the ones that I'm writing now, unfortunately.
That's a fair answer, Tatiana, because it is kind of difficult to remember those specific moments that you were writing for these books because it was a particular point in your life when you were writing that. So to get back to that headspace, it is very difficult. It's easy to remember characters, but it's difficult to remember certain scenes or moments from the book, which I completely understand. And kind of touching on, as you mentioned before, publishing. Now, as you were publishing these books, respectfully, one of my fans would like to know when you were in the process of publishing the duology and then later, of course, the Sister Samurai series, what really surprised you about that aspect of the author's journey?
Mm. Um, I honestly did not comprehend how popular Sister Samurai would be. Um, I published my duology, and when I published it, I had no social media. Like I threw it out there. I started the social media like pages the month that I published this book. So I started like really ground zero. And I'm so proud of how it's done so far. Um, but with Sister Samurai, when I published it, I saw like a groundswell of what I kind of hadn't expected. Definitely people who were interested and pulled in by the cover, interested by the premise, the people who have read my previous duology and was excited for my next work, kind of like all those things kind of come together to kind of like lift it in a way that my previous books did not. Um, so you do see as you keep publishing this kind of like rising tide because you are bringing in new readers, but also the readers that are following you from your previous books. All of it kind of adds together as you keep growing along this journey, as you keep growing along this author. That's why you get one of those tidbits where one of the best marketing you can do as an author is to write the next book.
Mm,
And at least for me, that's proven true in regards to just more visibility, more points of contact for people to be introduced to you and introduced to your work. And yeah, who knows? I'm gonna publish a new, as I said, I have a new book coming out soon, so we'll see if it does the same pattern or not. I don't know.
all right, all right. And this actually kind of brings up it's also a fan it's also a fan question, but it's one I've been wanting to ask another author, Tatiana, and it's this notion of which books are we most known for? Because I find it very interesting how there are books that we have spent a lot of time and effort on. As you mentioned earlier, the Bones duology that took you 4 years to write, whereas Sister Samurai, the first book, that took you like 4 months. But it seems to me, at least from my point of view, that a lot of people know you for Sister Samurai as opposed to the Bone duology. Now, one of my viewers would like to know, and I also would like to further add to it, for you as an author, how does that make you feel that most people know you for the book that's gotten your name out as opposed to the book that started your journey?
I think there's definitely like kind of two ways I look at it in my head. Um, when I wrote this in a kind of like a business minded sense, um, I was looking at my entire catalog. I was looking at, you know, what I can offer as a long-term career indie author. And so because of that, I did intentionally write this as I wanted it to be more accessible. I wanted it to be shorter and wanted to be at a lower price point. So am I surprised it's most popular? No, because I kind of in a business minded way intended it to be. I intended it to be the first book you start off with because again, like Sister Samurai, I never want the paperback to be like the paperback for this is $20 because of print cost because it's so big. But the
Right.
paperback for this is $10.99, and I always want it to be affordable, especially to my community, and have them able to read it. That's important to me. So am I surprised? No. But it also, on the flip side, has also made me very competitive, but competitive with myself. Like I want
Mm,
to do better than what I did before. I want to get more reviews than the past book. I want it to be more well reviewed than the past book. I want it to do more numbers than like I'm competing against myself now. Like, I want to do more and there's that inner thing inside me like, yeah, people know me versus samurai, but it'll be for something else. Just you watch. So
absolutely.
so yeah, so there's like the business minded, but also like just the inner competitive Tatiana.
Okay, all right. Now, of course, as authors and fellow creatives, we can't always be at our computers or with our notepad writing. We do have to have moments of respite and reprieve to get recharged. So, as another fan question, what do you do outside of writing? What are your hobbies?
Ah, I do admit that I'm not as good with that nowadays because I am really focused on writing. But when I can stop, I found I like to watch anime. One of the reasons is I like to watch it subbed because if have to read it, it forces my mind to focus on this because if I'm doing something else, I'm still thinking about writing. Like I'm still thinking about the next scene. I'm still thinking about things. So sometimes like watching things I need to read focuses my brain away from it. Um, I also try to like shut out a lot of social media so I can focus and then kind of focus on family. It also does help to have friends who aren't in the book world. And
Mm.
so it's just like, oh, okay, a breather. Yes, please tell me about your normal job. Yeah, so that's good. That's a nice change of pace as well.
Yeah, that is very, very true. I do have to admit, there have been days where I just want to take a step back from writing and just recharge. So I'll either listen to music, I'll read, I'll play some video games. I've been really hooked on RDR2 as of late, which is a very, very fun game. Beaten that about weeks ago, but still playing the epilogues. Very fun. And
Yeah, I'm currently
and you're absolutely
playing
right.
the new Assassin's Creed, the one in Japan, and I'm just doing like all of the side missions, the detours, take my time.
Oh, I have not played Shadows yet. I have not played Shadows. I think the last Assassin's Creed game that I've played was Mirage, Assassin's Creed
Mm,
Mirage, which That was a really good one. That was a really, really good game. I would have gotten Shadows, but unfortunately, it's on the new system, and I'm not dropping $600
No,
for a
that's
new
yeah,
gaming system.
that's understandable.
Absolutely. Now, this one kind of goes back to, as you mentioned before, Tatiana, that ultimately in your writing, to its core, you wanted to be almost like a safe space with open doors for Black women in the communities to have, like, a place to be themselves and to share their stories and what your stories want to do. And I imagine that as an author with that message, you have probably come in contact with your fair share of negative reviews and critiques. So we would like to know, or one of my fans would like to know, how do you handle those criticisms and negative reviews?
Well, experience. I wrote fan fiction for 4 years in college. And if you know anything about fan fiction, with it all being anonymous, sometimes like those critiques are even worse. I've gotten like death threats on fan fiction reviews sometimes.
Yes.
Um, which, I don't consider I've gotten anything that bad with my published work. Um, but again, experience, like learning how to deal with reviews, is part of the author journey, unfortunately. And it helps once you have more books, right? Because you don't have as much emotional value in one book doing well. There's not as much pressure. Having more books is just like, yeah, they didn't like it. Okay. I have another book I'm gonna write. So my biggest advice is to keep going. Like, don't let the noise keep you from writing.
Very well said, Tatiana. Very well said. Now, for both of your series, they distinctly have very different worlds, and their style is very, very different. Now, I've only ever read the Sister Samurai series, so I can't say much on the Bones duology. But from what I have been able to read from, like, reviews from other people, or from the synopses on your website or other places, they are both immersive and really take the reader into a new world that is both familiar and original. So, another fan question: how did you build the immersive worlds in your fiction to stand out?
Um, I think it kind of boils down to um my passions and my loves, right? Because I also love like stepping into a book and being immersed in a different world. So that's definitely a priority when I write. Um, I love history. I love to travel. I love to learn, and I bring all of that stuff into my world building, like just like little tidbits I've learned over the years or I've experienced. Um, I've kind of brought all of that into it. For example, with Bones of the Wind, like there's a note at the end of the book where this doesn't have a dictionary. It doesn't have a dictionary, and I wanted to reflect that experience of traveling to another country and not knowing the language and having to slowly build that language and slowly build what's going on and understanding what's going on. So I have a love for linguistics. I have a love of politics, um, and just the human, exploring the human condition in these fantastical worlds. Um, because I think at the end of the day, when you can empathize with characters in this world that you could barely imagine, like how hard or how far it is to empathize with characters in the world that we live in now.
Very true. Absolutely 100%, Tatiana. Now, as a little change of pace, these excited questions have stumped many people on the show, and no one has been able to fully answer these. So let's see if you can break the curse.
Okay.
All right. So the first of these fan questions is, if you had the opportunity, let's say you had unlimited funds, would you rather turn either the Bone Duology or the Sister Samurai series into a limited series on TV or streaming, or a full cast audiobook production?
Okay, that's easy. Sister Samurai full series because I want an anime. I want an animated series. It's one of those stories that I think could be adapted very well into anime, and we need more Black girl anime in that space. So that was an easy question.
Okay. Well, the follow-ups always seem to stump people, so let's see if you can keep going. So, with that said, now I'm going to try to tweak this just a little bit. Now, being this hypothetical series, for the main lead, who would you want to play Sister Samurai if you had the option? And again, this is going to be a tough one. Not a lot of people have been able to answer this. In what anime style would you want Sister Samurai to be?
Okay, so the anime style is definitely like that 90s anime. So think not shonen though, but think the older, like Afro Samurai, Samurai Champloo, Rurouni Kenshin, kind of like that little bit like
Oh,
older art style.
like the graininess, kind of like wasn't as like
Yeah, so
80s, early 90s kind of
right,
anime.
yeah. Doesn't look too young, right? Not like shonen, but older.
Right, like the golden age. Okay.
Yeah, the goal, yeah. That style. And in regards to the lead, I would like to bring like some iconic Black voice actors. The first one that immediately popped in my head was like Regina King, who voiced Riley and Huey on the Boondocks. I think could be a great option. Um, so just bringing in like some iconic, voice actors would be amazing. Or even
All
like
right.
Viola Davis. She'd be cool too.
Oh, that's a good one. Now, I
Or
also say that,
or oh no. Denai Guerra, she would be great as well.
oh gosh, you really got the heavy hitters. You really got the heavy hitters. Now, I will say this, even though it doesn't have like a narrator like narrating scenes, but I imagine it would. If there was a narrator, I'm just saying this because I know that she would be really good and she would definitely love this. One of my good friends and who's also a narrator, Carmen Chantel, who is an amazing narrator by far and voice actor. So she could do like character voices, background voices. She would be perfect. And I think she would definitely love Sister Samurai to death. And I wouldn't be surprised if she wanted to play the lead in the Bones duology. I think she'd be
Mhm.
absolutely very, very perfect. Now,
Yeah. Now,
here,
like I think one of the reasons why I have these answers is because I have been working on the audiobook for Sister Samurai. So it's actually going to drop very soon in the next couple of weeks.
woo, okay, okay. And oh, okay. Now we get to the one that really has stumped people. Now, okay, since we have, we have the anime, we have the hypothetical cast. Who would you want to sing the theme song to Sister Samurai?
Megan Thee Stallion. Bring it. Let's go.
Oh, okay. Now I'm actually wondering what this is going to be like. And honestly, I definitely think if this did get adapted into an anime or like an audio drama or audiobook, I would pay money to just listen to that and just hear the sort of fights. And I wouldn't be surprised if you somehow got royalty free music to go like in between chapters to get like you hyped for the next scene. Oh, that would be perfect, Tatiana.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Very, very nice. Okay. Now, okay, now this person wants to know more of the technical side to your writing,
Sure.
Tatiana. They would like to know for both series, what techniques have you used to heighten tension and suspense?
So for a good antagonist, um, because I feel like, you can't have a great hero without a great villain and a great
Right.
antagonist. And for Bone Woman specifically, she the it's a coming of age competition, and I always wanted to write two female rivals because I didn't feel like we had good rivals, kind of two female characters that pushed each other. And so she's not a villain per se, but she's definitely an antagonist, and they definitely work against each other's goals and motivations throughout the story. And so that means you need a character that's on each other's level, that can challenge each other and that can push each other, and that adds to the tension, that adds to the stakes. Same with Sister Samurai. Um, you find out that there is a shadow demon, um, throughout the book, and that shadow demon is the villain, and that shadow demon is the antagonist, and kind of just that opposite foil character that kind of pushes and raises the stakes and tension, um, against your hero.
Absolutely. A good villain really helps the hero showcase who they are.
Yes.
And as the saying goes, a hero is a hero, but everyone loves a good villain because a good villain really makes the story. A good villain is either the one that you fall in love with because he's such a great villain, or you absolutely want to see them dead because they are such a evil person. And I think that comes with, skill and definitely experience of writing villain to really understand, okay, what makes this villain tick, and also having different types of villains instead of just
Yeah.
a cookie cutter mold of a villain, because villains can come in all shapes and forms. Villains can be almost like the Kung Fu Panda trilogy. Tai Lung represented a villain representing the physicality of martial arts. You had Lord Shen, who was the psychological aspect of being a villain. And then you had Kai, who was more of the spiritual side of being a villain. They all reflected Poe in some aspect of his personality,
And
and
I
they
think
helped the character grow.
And I think that's a great tip and technique, especially in regards to writing sequels and like series, because a lot of writers do struggle with that, and how to maintain that tension and how to maintain that throughout a series. And as you stated before, um, look who's challenging the hero in different aspects. As you said, physicality, psychological, spiritual. Um, a villain can encapsulate multiple or all of those things.
Absolutely, absolutely, Tatiana. Now, another fan question, and I think you may have touched this in the beginning, but maybe you can go a little bit more in depth. How do you blend realism and fantasy in your stories?
So I do prefer a certain style of realism. And as we know, there it's in the fantasy genre, it's certainly like a spectrum
Yes.
where it's very unrealistic to very realism. Um, Sister Samurai, this is one of those stories that feels unrealistic.
Mm,
Because we have this fusion of Japanese and Black culture. We have these anachronisms. It's one of those things you go into and you're like, how? How does this work? But in order to make this concept work, I grounded it in realism. I grounded it in a character that felt very real, with that a character that had very real struggles that the reader could relate to. So sometimes grounding that big fantastical stuff in very realistic kind of goals and motivations helps like helps the belief of the narrative.
very true. And I like that. I like how it is almost like this blend and this balancing act, because you're absolutely right. There are some books that are unrealistic fantasy, but definitely have a realism to it. And then you have fantasy, which draws heavily on real world cultures and people to give it that unique spin, which kind of goes into the next fan question, which I think is really good. How do you research historical and cultural elements for your stories?
um I have to say this is one of the hardest and one of the most difficult things.
Mm,
um because I do like to draw a lot from non-Western cultures. And when you're doing like historical research for it, a lot of the times, a lot of these sources aren't translated into English yet, and you need to like know the original language in order to read them.
Right.
So sometimes, like doing research with non-Western cultures can be very difficult. Um, but we persist, right? Because we want to show and display these things. Um, I am very fortunate that I can draw a lot of things because I lived in Asia. I lived in both Korea, I've lived in both Japan, I've traveled to different countries in Asia, China, Indonesia, Taiwan. So because I do have those real world experiences, I can more easily draw on that compared to someone who has kind of like lived here in America.
Absolutely. And I think it is very true. And I actually remember something that another author said, Antoine Bandelet, another incredible author I had on the show. He also said that for his writing in particular, and I almost he agrees with you on this, is that when we think of fantasy, we tend to think of fantasy that's based more so on medieval Europe. That's been like the standard and basis for so long. But fantasy is much more than medieval Europe. It can be anything.
Yeah,
And I think that should be showcased and highlighted more. That you can write fantasy that's, let's say, based upon, you know, Islamic cultures or various traditions in the Islamic world. You can write a fantasy story that's based off of Chinese culture and Chinese mythology. Anyone's culture and history can be the inspiration and basis for the fantasy world that you're writing, but there has to be a respect to it. There has to
correct.
be a respect to it and a balancing act, because you don't want to outright write it as, this is like in the fantasy world. You want it to be an homage or some similarities to it as well. And as we're nearing the end of this incredible fan interview, Tatiana, I do have a final few list of questions. And this one, I'm really keen to hear your insight on, because I think you mentioned this in the editor panel before, but now I want to hear from your point of view, which is from one of my viewers who wants to know, how do you handle rewriting and edits without losing your vision?
I think you kind of go back to what is the story you're trying to tell, um, and you look at the edits and you look at your revisions and say, is this going to help strengthen the story I'm trying to tell, or is this going to weaken the story that I'm trying to tell? Because a lot of editing is suggestions, right? You don't have to accept every single thing that the editor is telling you to do, because you might have more background information, for example, about a character or about the history of the world that might not feel applicable to revision or to suggestion. And if it doesn't fit, like it's telling the story that you're trying to tell, then and that's your answer. But I do have to say that answer is harder to do for beginner writers and debut writers, because this is something that you learned with experience. Um, so keep practicing. And this is one of the reasons why, even if you get editing and you also get beta readers, you get ARC readers, feedback on your work is very important, because that's how you learn what feedback is that you carry on with you through the story, or with feedback that you're like, okay, this might not be the right audience, this might not be the right thing for the book that I'm trying to tell. So it is a skill, it is a learned skill, learning how to take revisions and learning how to take feedback. But my biggest suggestion is to start getting that feedback. um, start seeing what works for you and what doesn't.
Very well said, Tatiana. Very well said. And now we arrive at the final four questions of this incredible fan interview. Now, the first two questions I'm actually going to combine together into one, because they really do play off each other. and they're from the same person, so it makes it all the better. This person would like to know, how do you know when a story is truly finished, and how do you make sure that each ending of your book feels satisfying for the reader?
Hmm. For me, how you know a book is finished is when you have um, given the promise of the premise. So, for example, for Bones to the Wind, the premise is a coming of age competition where they're hunting down monsters. So, the ending is when you finished the coming of age competition and they become adults. That is the end. Um, so, it's that promise that you're giving to the readers with your premise. And once you've given that promise, that's how you know that you've made it to the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, these last two questions are really, really, I don't want to say opinionated, but they definitely bring up a lot of discussion. And a lot of my fans have been noticing this on the channel. I've been asking these more recently because I definitely think it needs to be talked about. So, this first question, or this first fan question that one person would like to know, and I'm going to paraphrase it because it's a very, very long one. So, they're ultimately saying how, as authors, we have to market our books in a certain way to fit in a certain category. But they themselves, as readers, know that some books often get mismarketed for the wrong genre and readership. I'm sure you have seen a lot of this, Tatiana, as a reader as well, seen books, let's say, that are supposed to be um, YA books, but are more closely to adult fiction books. And this has sparked a discussion of whether or not, like movies and video games, there should be a national rating system for books. And a lot of people are for and against this. Some people are for this because it actually makes sure that the right books are marketed in the right genre and readership category. But opponents to this believe that if we have a national system, that's going to pigeonhole authors in one category. So ultimately, this fan would like to know your thoughts on this discussion.
Okay. So when we're talking about labels, for example, in video games and movies, the labels tend to be based on age in regards to mature, in regards to teen, and not based on genre. Um, so I'm going to talk about, since we gave the comparison, ratings based on age,
Yeah,
because that's the example that we have.
right,
Um, and so are seeing a lot of books that are being published as adult, that is YA, being published as YA, that's adult. And the reason for this is kind of beholden on the publishers. Um,
right.
the publishers are trying to sell the books. These books, unfortunately, for the publishers, are products, and they want to sell the book to as many people as possible, regardless of actually the audience enjoying what the content of the book is. Um, yeah, it's if it happens, it's gonna have to come right. It's gonna have to come from the publishers, but the publishers are the ones who are the problem.
Right.
So it's asking the people who are the problem to rein themselves in, and I just don't know if that's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer because there's so many red tape that you would have to cut and everything. It just be a lot. It just be, too much. Now,
Right. And
this,
we do have YA sections, we do have adult sections, right? We do have one of the reasons is we have librarians who read the books and be able to like accurately disseminate these books. But what
right.
you're seeing now is with, rise of book bans and defunding of libraries and things like that. All of
Hmm.
these gatekeepers that we did have, who could accurately give in the hands of a teenager a YA book, are being gone. And so becomes even more of a problem because we don't have those people who, less and less of those people who, um, like are trying to make sure that the books get to their audience.
Yes. Again, very well said, Tatiana. Very well said. And now we come to the final question. And honestly, this is probably one of my favorite fan questions that I've ever been gotten, that I've ever been given on any interview. And I know that this person listened to my most recent episode to give this question. And they would like to know, Tatiana, that beyond everything that you've worked on in your journey as being an author and as an editor, do you also hold on, let me make sure I can read this right so I can get everything. Okay. Ultimately, this fan wants to know, at the end of the day, in addition to the message that you are wanting for your books, that you would also want your books to be the introduction for a person who maybe has not picked up a book in a very long time, and have it be this book that gets them back into reading. Because for all authors, the reason we are passionate about this, we loved reading. We grew up reading. And at the end of the day, we want our books to not only immerse our readers, we want our books to be the book that gets that person back into reading again. Is that almost the same message and hope you want for your books and the future projects you have in the works?
Yes, of course. Like I have gotten readers, messages that your books have gotten me back into reading. And it means so much to me. For example, like Sister Samurai, again, like I did conceive it to be accessible. For those anime fans who love anime and only read manga, and they haven't read a prose book in a long time, and it's like, well, why don't you give this a shot? you know um to make another medium accessible to them. I love reading, and I definitely want to share that love of reading with everyone. So yeah, that's another reason why I write, definitely.
Amazing, Tatiana. Absolutely amazing. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we conclude this amazing fan interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to my friend Tatiana for coming back on the show for her third appearance. And we wish her the very best here on The Wandering Scribe. Now, Tatiana, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect, as well as buy copies of Sister Samurai, its sequel, as well as the Bones duology? And I know you alluded to it in the beginning, but do you have any upcoming projects you would like to share, as well as any upcoming appearances that people can look forward to for the year?
Yes. So I am found online at Obey the Author, and my website, www.tatianaobey.com. I do sell direct, so I do have all my books there for purchase, signed. And in general, though, you can find my books at pretty much any retailer. Um, and sorry. Um, there's something else I was going to say, but I forgot, but that's okay. Um, and I'll talk about the new projects. So I do have an epic fantasy that is currently out with beta readers. This epic fantasy is an epic fantasy. So it's a chunky, it's a chunky
Nice.
book. Because it's chunky though, right, it takes a little bit longer with the copy editor. It takes longer with the proofreader. So it takes
Right.
longer to publish a book of that size. And so I'm anticipating that book to come out spring of 2027. But I am hoping to have arcs out by the end of the year. So definitely come follow me, join my newsletter. I'll be able to let you know when the arcs for that drop. The third Sister Samurai book will also be coming out in the fall of this year. And there is an audiobook dropping soon in a couple of weeks.
Ooh,
Yeah.
nice. I'll link all that down below in the description of this video, viewers and listeners. And if you'd like to see Tatiana's first appearance on the channel, I will link it here. And if you'd love to see Tatiana on the editor panel of the Writers Hub, I will also link it here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another amazing episode here on the channel. A huge thank you to my friend Tatiana for coming back on the show. We wish her the very best on her continued success. And if you'd love to see her back on the show for her fourth appearance on the channel, you know what you have to do. Like this video, comment down below, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill, signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Happy Thursday, everybody, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Take care and have a wonderful day.